Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Nimrod Pod. I am your embattled host, Lou Stump, alongside my brothers in arms, Chet Lifkit and Mel Goodman. It has been a somber week for the GOP. On Monday, we lost one of the greatest minds in modern conservatism, Richard Bruce Cheney. And it is with heavy hearts that we, the Nimrods, stand in solidarity with the entire Cheney family. Liz Cheney lost her father, but I lost my hero. I would like to take this moment to read off some of Dick Cheney's greatest and most patriotic accomplishments. First, co-authoring PNAC, the Project for the New American Century, a neoconservative think tank that advocated for 7 regime change wars to secure U.S. global military dominance. Second, winning the 2000 presidential election as George W. Bush's running mate. Third, shoving his hand so far up George Bush's ass that he could use him as a puppet to control the entire administration and the country. Fourth, with his hand armpit deep inside of Bush's asshole, ignore overwhelming intelligence signals that led to the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center. Fifth, with both arms fully immersed inside of Bush's loins, used the 9/11 attacks as a pretext to launch major regime change wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Sixth, securing over $2.3 billion in no-bid contracts to reconstruct Iraq and Afghanistan after the post-9/11 invasions that he previously launched by way of George Bush's tight little asshole. And finally, the honorable mentions, authorizing the CIA's warrantless black site torture programs in places like Guantanamo, and passing the Patriot Act to enslave America, installing a police state that remains in place to this day. Nimrods. Obviously, I am joking. Dick Cheney was a satanic, warmongering lizard person that stood against everything Republicans value in 2025. Every right-wing idea for the past 2 decades was created with the sole purpose of distancing the GOP from the neocons, especially Donald Trump's MAGA movement, Make America Great Again. The death of Dick Cheney symbolizes the death of the neocons, as the remaining warmongering Zionists make last-ditch efforts to take over the GOP. They're running around with their heads cut off. If you're not one for symbolism, the GOP got their asses handed to themselves last night in the November elections for this very reason. The Israel problem will cost the GOP the 2026 midterms and the 2028 presidential election if we do not cut ties with Zionism and go all in on the America First agenda. Who's with me?
Lou, I'm with you. I'm with you. To say Dick Cheney was my hero would be an understatement. The Nimrods out there know me as one of the largest neocons, one of the most well-endowed Zionist shills. When it comes to the 7,000 Club, I'm paid for my posts very frequently, and I've actually turned a lot of people towards Israel. Dick Cheney dying, it is symbolic of a new era. We still have neocons, we still have warmongers, we still have the same controlled opposition program in the GOP. And it's alive and well, but it's dwindling hard. And one of the things that's costing it is the Israel problem. A lot of people think foreign interference is too high for them to support the Republican Party anymore. And it's a complex issue, but we have to solve it if we want to win. Before we're off Dick Cheney, I mean, as much as we all love this guy, as much as the liberals and the new right all hate him, I saw something interesting. As we celebrate Dick Cheney's death, it's important to remember that he was always just an alcoholic goyim that we had permission to hate, and he was never a primary architect of the wars. I'm interested in the Nimrod's opinions on this, but this post claims Paul Wolfowitz, Douglas Feith, Scooter Libby, and Richard Pearl were the main architects of the wars. They were all Zionists, and they're all alive. What do we think? Do we think Dick Cheney was the mastermind, or was he the fall guy? Was he the scapegoat?
Dick Cheney was the mastermind. He was always the mastermind. if you don't believe me, then believe the left. They literally made an entire movie about how Dick Cheney puppeteered the entire Bush administration. Before he was in the administration, he was the CEO of Halliburton, this major military contract company, and he leveraged his position in the military industrial complex to lobby for the vice president position. Once in that position, he launched every single regime change war that he possibly could, and then gave his company exclusive contracts to go clean up the damage. That is exactly what President Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address. And it's almost like history repeats itself. It's almost like we keep punching ourselves in the face and then we act surprised when it happens again. But things are different now. We saw what happened in the November elections. The Republicans got absolutely swept. We lost every single major election. And it was for one single reason: the rejection of neoconservatism. We either need to pick between the Republican Party of the past or the Republican Party of today. If we go back to the past, it is reminiscent of that Bush administration, and it is embodied by people like Lindsey Graham that are shouting from the rooftops that Tucker Carlson is Hitler. Tucker Carlson is the biggest threat to Jews and the right wing on planet Earth today. The Republican Party of the old age has two main principles. One is that their foreign policy is neoconservative, and two is that their economic policy is libertarian. And this is embodied completely by something that Lindsey Graham said at the Jewish Republican Coalition meeting this past weekend. Graham said, "We're killing the right people and we're cutting your taxes." What more could you ask for? This is exactly what we voted for with Donald Trump. And I think that is the exact opposite of what we voted for. But those two things mirror the two principles of the old guard of the Republican Party: killing the right people, neoconservative foreign policy; cutting your taxes, libertarian economic policy. I'll tell you what, I'm not afraid of neoconservatives. I'm not afraid of them stealing over the hearts of American voters. That's not where their power is. Their power lies with the lobbies. Their power lies with control of the government. And all these talking heads of the neocons, Israel, and AIPAC gathered this past weekend at a conference in Las Vegas, where they called us all Hitler and claimed that they are MAGA and that America First is not MAGA, even though that's explicitly what Make America Great Again states. What I was most shocked about was Congressman Randy Fine's speech at this event. He calls Tucker Carlson Hitler. He says him and Nick Fuentes are the biggest threats to the right wing in Judaism and in America and our constitutional republic. And he claims that Tucker is not MAGA. Well, if you paid attention to the legislation that Mr. Fine has been pushing as of recent, you'd know that he's been calling for legislation in Florida, which would mandate 5 years of jail time for anti-Semitic free speech. Fine thinks that conduct is not protected by the First Amendment, and he wants hate speech to be a felony. So he's going to turn your free speech into hate speech under the guise of anti-Semitism, and then he's going to throw you in jail for it. He uses analogies like, if you spray a bunch of graffiti, that's not a felony. But if you have a hateful intent, then that's a felony. If you wave a sign in front of him at a rally, that's not a crime. But if you have hateful intent, that is a crime. Fine wants to classify expressions of free speech or conduct as a hate crime based on intent. The thing is, intent is up for interpretation, and it leaves it up to who? The judge and the legal system to use their discretion. Who controls the legal system? Not the American people, not at the local level. So essentially, they're leaving intent up to who? The government, not the people. And it is on a case-by-case basis so that they can decide if they want to throw you in jail or not. Even if that judge is a good person, they're a local judge. If they get a phone call from AIPAC, Netanyahu, the neocons, and they get threats, they get blackmail threats, they get a big check full of money thrown in their face, they have no problem using their discretion to throw your ass in jail for 5 years. What are you guys most shocked about from the old guard of the Republican Party, and what caught your eye at this recent Jewish Republican Coalition conference?
One of the things that I loved about the Jewish conference was the fact that while Randy Fine, one of the fattest and ugliest guys that we could possibly put on stage, was speaking and saying this nonsense, they had a bunch of little gay cheerleaders in yarmulkes holding signs in front of them that said, Tucker is not MAGA. It's like, where have we seen this before, right? Where have we seen the repetitive phrases so that people are supposed to believe them? Where have we seen the speech policing? Where have we seen that before? It's from the authoritarian left. It's from the authoritarian left. So when these people say certain people aren't MAGA, when they say certain people aren't conservatives or America first, they're just projecting. They're projecting. Policing free speech is not a conservative ideology. That's actually an authoritarian leftist ideology. And why are we going down the same road as the left that they've been going down forever, where any dissent from the official acceptable party slogans is treated as an outcast? Um, I think these people are extremely hostile. I think this is their last ditch effort to save the old Republican Party, the neocons, the Zionists, whatever you want to call it. And they realize that the tide is turning and their time is over. So, I mean, could they have done it any worse way than getting Randy Fine, somebody who every single person in this country hates, if they have ever seen him, and then a bunch of little idiots in front of him to hold up signs? The optics on that are so bad, it's almost like they're purposefully bad. They're trying to draw criticism to I have no idea what their intentions are, but yeah, let's stay away from the speech police. There's no such thing as hate speech, and we can just disavow that altogether right now.
When it comes to Jewish hate, I have two trains of thought. I've got the idea, like anything, it's one person hating another for one reason or another. And then there's this big media push for anything that is calling out Jews for a certain thing or calling out Israel for a certain something that's also now in this Jewish hate category. There needs to be a clear line, and there is not right now, and it drives me crazy. And I actually have a good Muslim friend who hates Jewish people and makes it known. So he actually went down the street of New York. He lives in New York, and he saw this Jewish family of 12 having a nice meal, and he decided to take 30 seconds to a minute of his life to walk down the street and start yelling terrible, heinous things at these people. That, in my eyes, is hate. However, that's not a hate crime. A hate crime would be if I hate a certain group, I take a rock and I throw it through their window. Now that is up for interpretation of if you want to try me for a hate crime. But getting back to your point, Lou, this new legislation that Randy Fine is bringing into the state of Florida is under further interpretation, because a hate crime is a hate crime. You don't need to tell me that I'm putting a new law in to enforce Jewish hate crime. No, because then you're going to take hate speech and turn that into hate crime. A hate crime is a hate crime, and it should be charged and interpreted that way. We don't need to add another level that adds further ability to interpret free speech into a hate crime.
Great analogy. And we've spent a lot of time talking about Zionism, neocons, Israel. And I want to make it abundantly clear to our audience. There's something going on here, especially here in America. Christians are being attacked. And you can choose to side with Islam. You can choose to side with Israel and Judaism. But the reality of the situation is Islam and Judaism are covertly allied against Christianity to destroy Christianity, especially here in America and around the world. Islam equals the radical leftists. Judaism equals the Zionist neocons. What do they have in common? Globalism. Globalism. This is the evil cabal we've been talking about. This is a spiritual battle of good and evil. And the Christians, need to stand up against evil, because Christ commands you to live a radical life, to spread his word, and to bring as many people to him as possible. This doesn't mean roll over and be a peaceful non-interventionist. No, this means you fight back against evil. You're commanded to fight against evil. There's a reason the Crusades happened. And what we need right now is another crusade. So Christians, what you can do today is stand up and demand a three-state solution. Hey, J.D. Vance, if you really want to preserve those holy sites, do we need Israel to do it for us? Why don't we take back the holy state of Jerusalem and the Holy Sepulchre? That could all be ours. That could all be out of the hands of foreign countries who hate us and kill us overseas. And it could be in the hands of the good guys, the one true Christian country, whether or not you want to believe it.
So while I was away, I was listening to the podcast from last week, and Lou, you made a great point. When it comes to Christianity, I think of the faith in terms of a group of people. Obviously, Jerusalem itself is holy. However, unlike the Islamic and Jewish faiths, I don't feel as strong of a connection to the area in which Jesus and other holy figures were, because Jesus made a church, and a church is a people that follows a religion and ultimately goes back to the Father. I don't care about a site. That's the reason I don't think there needs to be a three-state solution. They can fight all they want. I don't think the Christians need to get involved, because the Christians have a faith outside of an area. It is international, and to be quite honest, for the most part, I could care less about a certain holy site because I still have my faith.
Great point, Mel. Again, we talked about this a few episodes ago. Israel goes through a transformation. God's people go through a transformation from the Old Testament to the New Testament. It goes from the ethnic Israel, the descendants of Abraham, to the church in the New Testament, when God makes a new covenant and Israel becomes the church. And the church are followers of Christ, not a physical place. And this is exactly what makes Christianity different than every other religion. And that's what makes it a threat to every other religion. We don't need some holy site. We're not going to waste our time fighting over it. So, J.D. Vance, you want to preserve the holy site so bad. One, we don't need Israel to do it for us. We can do it ourselves. But two, do we really need to do it at all? Sure, I think it is a powerful thing to be a Christian and go back to these sites and to see it and experience it. I think that means something, but it doesn't mean everything. And that's the difference between us and the bad guys.
Another topic here. So Nimrods out there watched Fuentes and Tucker talk last week, and the Heritage Foundation got lambasted for not condemning it, not condemning the conversation itself or Tucker. And finally, at the end of the week, the one of these Israel caucuses came in and listed off 5 demands and a bonus demand for the Heritage Foundation to redeem themselves in the eyes of the Zionist right. So first, they need to remove the video. They need to delete it. They need to apologize to all of the neocons and Zionists out there, those poor people. And then they need to condemn anti-Semitism. And by condemn anti-Semitism, they mean disavow all of the conservative or right-wing influencers who are not fully shilling for Israel at all times. Number 4, they need to do a conference about groypers. They need to claim that groypers are evil, and while they might be, it's still kind of funny that they are causing enough of a scene in order to be part of this list. And then they need to hire a Gen Z whisperer from the Israel caucus for the Heritage Foundation so that he can turn the tide for them. And the bonus, which is the best part, is they are to host a Shabbat dinner where members of this Israel caucus will come in and teach the members of the Heritage Foundation about Judaism. So this is like an evil school teacher who's trying to enforce draconian laws on people who are just looking for what's best for America. You know, if we're searching for the truth, if we want to hear all people's opinions, Why do we need to be policing who can speak and who can be a part of the movement? Why do we need to be policing it? Why do we need somebody to come in and fix everything when it's not broken? So there was a Christian guy at this Heritage Foundation event this week who said, I don't feel comfortable going to the Shabbat dinner. I feel like that's against my faith. And I feel like you're using it as a litmus test to identify who's on your side in this movement and who's not. And the response was hilarious. The lady who answered the question said, I'm offended that you would say it that way, and I'm so sorry that you're acting in bad faith. And we would never make these demands. These are helpful requests for the Heritage Foundation to get back in the good favor of the public. What these people fail to realize is that the public, especially young, early 20s, late 20s men, are totally done with the whole neocon right and the whole shill for Israel game. It's time for the America First movement to take precedence. And so everybody who's fighting and clawing so hard is only making it worse for the Zionist movement. And with every action they take to try and shut things down, it's only going to make it worse.
The Heritage Foundation sure has a lot of work to do. First, they defend Tucker Carlson, then they rescind their statements. And now, when I looked at X earlier, right before we started recording, I noticed that they are, to this day, the primary sponsor of the Mark Levin radio show. So were they ever really on our side? You know, William F. Buckley was one of the guys that created the Heritage Foundation. He was one of the godfathers of the conservative movement, the quote-unquote modern conservative movement. In other words, neoconservative movement. They always quote these guys, Buckley and Irving Kristol. But these are two guys from foreign countries. They come here to tell us how to be good globalists. That's not conservatism. That's not populism. And that's not America First. So we need to decide who we're going to be. And at this point in time, we are not going to get along with the globalist neocons ever. There is a permanent divide in the right wing. So first, we need to squeeze out the Democrats. That needs to be number one priority. And if we have to ally with them, then we have to ally with them before the midterms and before the 2028 election. Once we squeeze out the Democrats, we can focus on the war party versus the party of the people. And who do you think is going to win every single election after that point? I damn sure hope it's the good guys. The only thing that the neocons have are the donors, the big money. So what is our solution? We need to get involved at the ground level. Republicans failed in the November elections. Everyone thinks that since Trump won, I don't have to pay attention anymore. La, 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 la. Everything's okay. Just fuck me in the ass. I won't look. Oh my God, just fuck me. I'm not going to look. That is the problem with Republicans today. We win an election and we go the fuck to asleep and we let some guy pound us in the ass. That can be no more. We need to be a true grassroots movement. And not just when Donald Trump gets shot in the head. Every single day, Benjamin Franklin walked out of the Capitol building and when the people asked him, what type of government have you given us? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. It is our duty to be involved. The day we stop being involved is the day we lose a republic. And that is what we're seeing right now. We know the people want populism. So get the fuck involved. We need a grassroots movement with grassroots funding. So physically get involved, get up off your ass and vote and campaign for people and get involved with the community and unashamedly proclaim how you feel about your life and our society and donate to the good guys. If it's not a grassroots movement with grassroots funding, we will never be able to defeat the big money Zionist donors.
And it is a grassroots movement. That's the good thing. We know it is because no matter how much legislation or money comes down the hole, we're still here. We're still here and it's growing. There's a bigger and bigger problem, is what I would call it, of the young people on the right. So it's either you get the people, you get the future, or you get the donors. And the donors is all they have left. All they have left is old money, Zionist, globalist donors. And it's an easy win.
The Republicans got their asses handed to themselves in these November elections. We lost every major election that we set out to win. A pollster said that the GOP lost simply because Trump wasn't on the ballot. And I think that says something. Trump said it himself. We lost because Trump wasn't on the ballot. That's because we need real star power. And conservatives need daddy to come home and tell them what to do, to rally them all together to vote. And when Trump's not on the ticket, we don't have a leader. Daddy isn't home. So we can't settle for a Jeb Bush. We can't settle for Vivek Ramaswamy. We can't settle for Byron Donalds as the Florida governor. We need a leader of men. We need a star. We need an universally recognized, powerful star to unite the right wing against globalism in all forms, neoconservative and radical left liberalism. We need real star power. We've been talking about this for weeks. Tucker Carlson is getting an unheard of slew of attacks thrown at him. He is getting the full wrath of the donor class on both sides of the aisle. And I think there's only one way out of this. Clearly, the people reject Zionism. They reject Israel first. And all they care about is putting ourselves first. All they care about is making their lives more affordable and not sending our money overseas. That's why all these leftists won, because they stood up against Israel. Doesn't mean they're not globalists, but the left wing is realizing that the entire world is turning against Zionism, turning against Israel, not Jews, Israel, the secular state, and all of our politicians that are funded by them. They have an opportunity to undercut the Zionist donors, go with the Soros wing, just like Mamdani did. Soros funded his entire campaign, and win over regular people that don't want to see a genocide in the Middle East funded by our tax dollars. So what do? The only answer to this is Tucker Carlson 2028. Tucker for president. Tucker, they've already tried canceling him. Now they're clearly trying to kill him. They're calling for him to be neutralized. They've already sent assassins after him. Ukraine sent an assassin after him when he went to Moscow to interview Putin. He's finally talking about it, thank God. And who's next? They're calling for one of their radical pawns to go out there and kill Tucker. They already have foreign powers trying to kill Tucker because he's so anti-war. So what is Tucker's only option? He can keep talking about it and he'll keep gaining power. And that's what he's going to do for now. But the only long-term solution for the betterment of our country is for him to run for president. Because if there's anyone that can pick up where Trump left off, it's him. And actually advance our America First agenda into the future. Progress. Donald Trump was the spark that lit the fire. He got our foot in the door. He got the people's foot in the door to take back the republic. And now that Donald Trump has paved the way for us to be radical, it's time for us to go in there and be radical. Do you guys agree with me, or am I wrong?
That'd probably work. I think Tucker is another character that we could bring in, kind of like Trump was. And Trump has kind of ruined his appeal as an outsider at this point. But I think it would be an interesting idea. I also think that while Tucker might have lost the hyper globalist right, the Israeli lobby, I don't think it's as big of a voting bloc as everybody makes it out to be, right? And especially not as we move into the future and the baby boomers are dying off. So I think it could be interesting. If not 2028, there's more time after that. He's not an old guy. But as he keeps gaining popularity, they're going to keep getting more and more frantic about it, especially if he's making a run. So he's just got to really beef up that security. Honestly, Trump should probably offer Secret Service protection for him.
Yeah, there's a lot of unhinged people out there. You never know who they're want to hit next. It could be Tucker, unfortunately, but you never know. I don't know how I think Tucker would do as a presidential candidate. I would like to see, when time comes sooner, the ideas that he posed and the strength behind his voice. But when it comes to local elections and the elections that the Republican Party just lost for the most part, I look at New York and I have a lot of confusion. You've got Mamdani and Cuomo, and then you've got a Republican candidate who's never going to win in New York. So why is there not some sort of collusion to some sort of extent, some teamwork to get the lesser of two evils in office? If I lived in New York, I would have registered as a Democrat to vote, or I guess in this case, independent to vote for the lesser of two evils. I don't understand why there was no sort of collusion here in order to make the city better for the next foreseeable future, but it just confuses me. It's unfortunate. However, Mamdani at the same time is getting New York to vote for him, and he is anti Israel. What's going to happen to all the Jews in New York who voted for him, and they have no clue the direction in which his administration is going to lead? State and local legislations have more power on the day-to-day lives of the people that live in those areas than the national administrations. And people don't understand this. That's why there's so few people voting for these local elections, because all they care about is what they hear on the news, and all they hear about is national level.
I want to take a step back and let's revisit this whole New York City mayor race. So we had Mamdani, who defeated Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary. So he beat Cuomo, and he was now the Democratic nominee. And we also had a Republican nominee who won his party, Curtis Lewa. Then all the guys that lost to Mamdani in the Democrat primary ran as independents. We had Eric Adams, who eventually dropped out and endorsed Cuomo, who's this other guy. He ran as an independent. He already showed that he could not defeat Mamdani. Yet all of the Zionist donors flooded Cuomo's bank account with money. And he ran a massive campaign for a mayor. Why is that? Because Curtis Lewa isn't a Zionist. Cuomo proved that he couldn't win. Eric Adams proved that he couldn't win. And they had their Democratic nominee. But all the Republicans put their money behind Cuomo and Adams. Donald Trump then comes in like 3 hours before the polls close and endorses Cuomo to try to get him a bump and completely ruins Curtis Lewa's chances. I'll tell you what, Curtis's chances were already shit when Donald Trump endorsed Cuomo. The real question is, why didn't Donald Trump step in months ago to either install an appropriate candidate on the Republican Party or to uplift Curtis Lewa? Listen, I'm not a Curtis Lewa expert, but I know he's not a Zionist. He's not a globalist. He's a man of the people. He is a true New Yorker who's been defending New Yorkers for decades. He's gotten shot almost 10 times by mob hitmen in the streets of New York. And he is a local legend. He's an icon. So if he didn't get any money to support his campaign, so it was completely grassroots, and the leaders of our GOP didn't step in to uplift him. I'm not saying that I'm a big Curtis Lewa fan, but Trump refused to back him. That's why he never stood up for Trump in those mayoral debates. You can't, he knew Trump wasn't going to back him, so he wasn't saying he was going to work with Donald Trump to take out all the illegal immigrants. So the argument that New York is Democrat, why would we not collude to run a Democrat against a Democrat and just make sure the socialist communist doesn't win? We set a precedent in this election so that a Republican will never be able to run, let alone win, an election in New York City ever again. Unless Mamdani totally just destroys the city and has more power than we think a mayor does, and we will get a radical Nick Fuentes type that comes in behind him. But I don't think that's going to happen. We set a precedent. A Republican will never have a chance in New York City ever again. And it's a damn shame. And I wish our GOP leadership would have done something about it sooner instead of bitching. No one ever presented a solution, ever. And now we're bitching about people not voting for Andrew Cuomo, the guy that killed everyone's grandma. Yeah, he's not a socialist. Yeah, he's better than Mamdani. I wish he would have won. But why are we all stressing so hard about voting for this guy when we didn't do anything about it months before? That's all I got to say.
So the general election, I'm not too interested in the dynamics of that. I do think Zoran's case is interesting because he got so many votes. He also had the backing of Alex Soros for some reason. Soros is Jewish. Zoran is supposedly a rabid Islamic extremist. and he's going to be terrible for the Jewish people of New York. So I don't think he will. I don't think he will. If he wants to implement socialist policies, which he said he would, I don't see how there's a path to him being able to do that in New York City. But here's an interesting theory. So, New York City is the financial center of the world. We are in the midst of the largest financial bubble of all time. This is bigger than 2007. This is bigger than the dot-com bubble. This is bigger than anything ever. The AI bubble is what a lot of people call it. And the center of the financial world elected a socialist mayor in the heat of it. We're at the peak right now. Will he be the scapegoat for the inevitable collapse? Maybe. Maybe. Will he cause businesses to flee New York? Will he cause businesses to flee New York in New York City and cause a gigantic financial issue in New York in the midst of a global balloon burst, bubble pop, and then take socialism out of the minds of every American forever in the foreseeable future? Maybe. So I think there's more behind the scenes. There's no way that he ran a grassroots movement when he had the backing of Alex Soros, all of the high level, I guess, super pro immigration Democrats at his victory party. I think there's more than meets the eye here.
And I want to come back to Mel's point on the Jews. Yeah, obviously, Mamdani is anti-Israel, and a lot of the Jews and the businesses and the capitalists and the wealthy people are leaving New York. But what we don't think about is all the communists and illegal immigrants are going to flood into New York. And the reality of the situation is they're not going to have a loss of population. They're going to have a surge in population. Every single immigrant that comes over the border will go straight to New York City, LA, and Chicago. Why? Trump's going to cut off all of the federal welfare, and you will have to rely on local and state welfare to survive if you are a bottom feeder or an illegal immigrant or a communist, and they're going to flood into the cities. This is something called replacement migration. The globalists have been talking about this forever. The WEF, the Bilderberg Group, the Rothschilds, they laid out the foundation of what they were going to do. They want to remove all of us, white men and Christians, and install their new voter base. Mamdani doesn't need his white voters. He doesn't need to bribe them with food stamps. They already have it. What he needs to do is he needs to put out a piece of cheese on a mousetrap and attract as many incremental voters as possible. This is what they've done in California and Chicago and now New York City, so that we'll never be able to win an election. Why? Because they keep bringing in incremental voters that weren't there before. And what's happening to all the regular people, the moderates and the conservatives? They're leaving, and they're going to Florida and Texas. We're not going to lose any elections in Florida or Texas. So the real question is, we know what they're doing. This is replacement migration. Should everyone flee? Or do we have a duty to hold the line, especially in the cities we call home, the cities where our families immigrated here from? Curious what you guys think.
Chet, I believe indubitably that these big businesses will leave and migrate somewhere else. We're going to see democracy in its finest, most condensed form when New York becomes a shithole. That'll show you how all 50 states come together to form one nation, but they're all still separate entities. The state of Florida and the state of Texas will be very much different than New York, because New York, at the path that it's on now, will become micro-communist. We will see a totally different environment, a totally different economy, and a totally different way of life between these two states in the same country.
Well, to Lou's point, I think the people in New York need to hold the line, because it's an established UN document that's 200 pages long that describes how people use replacement migration. And one of the things that the Democrats have been doing every time they've been in office for the past 10 years at least, no, well, not 10 years, but in the past 10 years especially, has been importing unheard of hordes of people from third world countries because they know that they have their vote in the future. So is that is that Zoran's plan? Probably. Should the people stay there and hold the line? If you can. If you can. I mean, I would hate to see my taxes increased in order to provide free buses and free subways that you can't even go on because now that they're free, they're covered in criminal activity. So I say hold the line for
I
all
have
you.
two trains of thoughts here. The first one with my heart is I want everyone to leave and I want to see the shithole that this city and that this state becomes so America learns. Now, on the other side, I understand where you two are coming from because if we let this happen, what could it become? Would it become its own micro country that forms terrorists? And then there's a very bad state and city in the US that can attack its own people. So I don't know exactly where I lie in this issue, but regardless, I want it to be a learning experience.
A country is only as great as its greatest cities. If we let these cities fall, there will be some sort of trickle down effect. You could argue, hey, Dallas, Tampa, Miami, these are Nashville. These are the new big cities. And on one hand, you might be right. But New York City is already established. LA is already established. We built these cities up. And what are they turning into? And what happens when we're replaced by non Americans, by people that don't love America, people that hate us, take control of these cities? What type of power comes with that? And what type of message does that send to the rest of the world when our greatest cities are destroyed and taken over by evil? I don't know. And I don't like it. I do want to come back to another angle on this Democratic sweep of the November elections. You could obviously argue that there was some election meddling. In fact, I know there was. I mean, clearly, this is a problem that is much harder to solve than Trump may have initially thought. And I totally understand that. More importantly, how much of an impact did this government shutdown and the EBT cutoff actually have on the election results? I'd say not an insignificant one. The Democrats purposely turned up the heat going into that No King's Day. They didn't have enough funding to stoke a major violent uprising. So then they looked towards the election of Zoran Mamdani. And they knew people would go in to the November elections hating Trump on both sides of the aisle. So, like, were these votes for the Democrats or were they just against Trump and against the old guard of the GOP? I think we already talked about this. We've made our case. Clearly, it was against Trump. And I hope he got the message because this is now a wake-up call that we have to harness. Now, let's keep in mind, now that Mamdani won and the shutdown's still going, what is the Democrats' next move? The longer this goes on, the worse chances we have of winning the midterms. So do they string it on? Maybe. But I heard a rumor. That they've been waiting for Zoran Mamdani to win to get excitement behind the Democrat Party and trick some of the normies. And once they have this momentum, the Democrats, be the bigger man and end the shutdown themselves and take all the credit and blame it on the Republicans to actually start to gain grassroots support for their party again. Their party that is back against the wall, almost falling off the cliff, basically non-existent, but not dead yet. This could be a problem for the Republicans. We need control of the House, the Senate, the courts, and the executive branch to get anything done. If we don't have all red all over our federal government, it is impossible for Trump or any Republican for that matter to carry out their agenda. What do you guys think this means?
It would make sense, Lou. It would make sense. I think the Democrat Party is dead. You know, if they want to go down the middle, if they want to distance themselves from the globalism, which they never will, they can try. They can try. They can try and pick up the middle 60% of Americans. But I don't think it's going to work. They've shown themselves to be liars. They're never going to change. And even if they try and posture up a normal looking guy like Gavin Newsom, I don't think anybody's going to buy it anymore. So despite their best efforts, I think we have the winning movement here, which is taking the interests of Americans and putting it at the forefront of the political sphere.
Lou, if your theory is correct, I would think that Americans are stupid enough to believe it. I think even with X and other good forms of communication, you still have these majority Democratic led news outlets that are going to give the communication to the people that they want to hear. So, whenever election time comes around, I would not be surprised if the stance, the portrait you just laid out would be the narrative. And I would also not be surprised if that turned a handful of voters over to the Democratic nominee.
Amen. I want to segue over to a new topic, guys. I think we've beat this one into the dirt. We've bobbed that head off the side of the concrete more times than we can count. And it's time to move on. The GOP of the past is dead, and the Democrats are on their way out unless we let them slip into the void. But we can't let that happen. So let's move on to something way more important. Porn! Let's talk about the impact of porn, video games, and screens on young men and the dangers of feminism. Throughout history, men have rebelled any time where they have been alienated. And today, men, especially white Christian men, are being demonized by the entire managerial class and the deep state system of control. Why are we not rebelling? Well, that's because men are being sedated. And they're being sedated not just out of rebelling, but of being useful and having a sense of purpose. We talk about porn, video games, screens. Let's look at video games first. Video games are a simulacrum of societal achievement and contribution, but with real life people just communicating virtually. I'm not saying video games are bad. I think they are intellectually stimulating, but they give you a false sense of reality so that you don't want to, put pants over your boxers and walk outside and get some fresh air. Maybe go to work. Maybe get your own apartment, move out of your mom's basement. Maybe, I don't know, go meet a nice girl at a bar. This isn't happening. Men aren't having relations with women. Why is that? A lot of it's our fault because we've been targeted, because we've been alienated, and we've been sedated and distracted. But on the other hand, while doing this, they've propped up women. And they've created a dangerous thing called feminism. And I don't just feel bad for the men that feminism is so prominent. I feel bad for the women. Motherhood is being vilified. It's being looked down upon. It's being shamed. And that is the entire purpose of a woman's life, is to bear children, take care of them. That's it. Bear none. That's how they were biologically made. And I think that's the most important job in the entire world. But they're being shamed for staying home with their children. They're being shamed for getting pregnant and have to take time off work to focus on their family and developing young minds. That's sick. What are you guys most concerned about? What are the biggest threats facing mankind? And how can we stop them?
So we've always had the bread and circus problem, Lou, where they distract people so they don't cause an uprising. It's way back to the Roman times and probably before that. But this is bread and circus on steroids. Because when we have the phones, everybody's a victim of the phones. One thing I recommend is get your screen time down, grayscale your phone so it's not as dopamine maxing. Then you have the video games, which honestly, I've heard because of the phones, most people find video games to be like a healthier option than just scrolling on your phone. But it's still terrible. It's still engaging you in an escapism where you won't try and fix things in your life or change the world in a positive way. And then there's the porn, which is just the epitome of all things bad. It's giving you the feeling that you're actually doing something that you're supposed to be doing, which is having sex with women. It's giving you that feeling, but you're not really doing it. And then you end up in the pool of shame afterwards because you're a disgusting little gay boy. And porn is gay, by the way. So Nick Fuentes' accusation of watching gay porn, wouldn't that just be any porn? because it's all gay. You're looking at the guy. You're looking at the guy's dick. All you Nimrods out there need to stop watching porn. So the worst trifecta of things are all attacking the young men in this country and every country. And they're fucking winning right now. So at a certain point, we have to turn around and say, enough is enough. We got to stop doing this stuff so that we can really just try and take the world back into our own hands and try and make a change so that the world doesn't completely leave us behind and things don't just deteriorate forever. So lots of things for Nimrods to take away there.
I grew up on the understanding that everything in moderation is okay, and to some sort of extent, that is true. Whenever it comes to video games and socializing with your peers, moderate gaming, I am not opposed to. I think it helps communication. It's a way to pass time. It may be less creative compared to the old boys, girls, neighborhood crew playing kickball out in the street. However, it is still communication. But with any good thing comes addiction. You've got video game addiction. You've got these middle schoolers, these high schoolers staying up till 3 a.m. on a school night, absolutely ruining their next day, making them not want to go and participate in sports, making them not want to go and talk to girls. And then shifting over to porn, and especially with men, the University of Michigan says that by the age of 15, I believe, almost 100% of men have masturbated to the point of ejaculation. And that is a frightening statistic. And like you all said, media and the internet do not help this at all. There's something called a trigger in psychology. And a trigger is a place, a person, or a thing that makes you want to do an addiction of the past. For example, if I go on Snapchat, or if a middle schooler goes on Snapchat and all they see is a bunch of OnlyFans girls on there, what are they going to think? It's terrible, it's isolating, and it's a fake imagination of what a relationship should be. And America and the internet are pushing it on young individuals to ruin their brain chemistry, ruin their ability to make good decisions, and ultimately ruin their ability to have a lifelong, everlasting relationship with a good woman to ultimately have awesome kids and lead them down the Christian faith.
Great point, Mel. It's really simple, guys. If you stop watching porn, you'll want to talk to women. If you stop playing video games, you'll want to go be useful in the real world. If you get off your phone, you won't feel so guilty and be so ashamed of what you're seeing. You will actually have a real attention span and you will be present. Stop eating carbs, go to the gym, stop playing video games, stop watching porn, and maybe, just maybe, you will have enough pent up testosterone to take back our country and demand your rights back.
I agree, Lou. Get the fuck off your phone, Nimrods. Grayscale it, take the dopamine out of it, and eventually you'll realize what a slave you've been this entire time. Same thing with
Take
the porn.
risks, Nimrods.
Yeah.
Take risks.
Same thing with the
Talk.
porn.
Socialize.
You're gonna go in there and you're not gonna watch the porn this weekend. You're gonna go in there and you're just gonna think it out. You're gonna go straight into your imagination, but don't go and fry your dopamine receptors. This is the return of the attention span. We're finally gonna win, and it's gonna be because we're the only people that can focus for more than 15 seconds at a time. And Nimrods out there, we're going to be the new Groypers. And this is going to be a political movement of people that can focus, people that aren't so locked in on escapism. And eventually it's going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I think everyone our age is focused on what's next and just trying to stimulate themselves in any way they can. We don't have attention spans, as you said. And I think that's the most dangerous thing. Like, people can't just set a timer for 10 minutes and sit with God once daily. Like, that is the only way to connect with Jesus. It's not just through servitude. If you're only serving and not sitting, you miss the entire point of the gospel. If you're unable to sit and read the Bible once daily and then actually turn your mind off, tell God, I'm sitting and I'm available to you, that's a problem. And that's been a problem for all of us, like myself included. And we're just now realizing it because we've been sedated to the point where we are shells of men. We are just flesh and bones. And we need to regain the male spirit, the American spirit. That's the only way to take back our country.
I want everyone listening out there with their own addictions to be bold, and I want you to take action. We can get up here and say whatever it is we want. We can say this is bad, this is good, but ultimately it comes down to action. It comes down to how do you get rid of these addictions? You don't need to go to a counselor. You don't need to go to a psychologist to get your problems fixed. There's a few things you got to do, and I've got an easy roadmap for you. The first is talk. Talk to God, talk to your friends. If you don't have any friends, find a friend. The way that you find friends is you be bold, you be honest, you share things about yourself, you listen, you get to know them, tell them your problems. And if you're really struggling with something, have an accountability partner. Tell them that whenever you fail at what you are doing, have that awkward conversation with them so you don't want to have that awkward conversation with them and you stop your problem. Go for a walk. Get away from whatever trigger is triggering you, whether it's video games, porn, drug addictions. Talk about it, pray about it, go for a walk, find things that work for you, and you can overcome your problems.
We've talked about a lot of the problems facing men today. Let's go around the horn. What are the biggest challenges that you're facing? What changes are you trying to make in your life? Chris Williamson went on Tucker Carlson this week, and they opened the podcast by saying the question that Chris gets all the time, or rather the statement that he gets all the time, is that young men don't have a sense of purpose. They have all of this willpower, and they don't know where to go with it. Some of them don't even have willpower because they've been sedated. I think all three of us, Nimrods, have recognized that we are being played, and we're all making steps to improve. What are the biggest changes you made in your life as of recent? And then what are your aspirations? What do you intend to do next to better yourselves?
So, one thing I've worked on over the past few months or so or weeks has been screen time and overall attention span building. I was at a point where I was basically useless in a normal physical setting. Any normal conversation was getting boring fast because I was so used to the constant stream of input from X and Instagram Reels. So I've been working on getting the screen time down. Some weeks are better than others. Some weeks are better than others. But Nimrods out there that have the same issue and you're trying to make it better, there's ways you can go about it. And you don't need to spend a bunch of money on fancy gadgets to keep yourself from being a screenager. But you can track your screen time, just keep note and try and be 10% better every week. And at a certain point, you'll be free from the phone trap, from the phone addiction dopamine reward cycle, and life will be brighter.
The biggest change I've made in my life is I've become much more blunt with what I say. In a good way. Obviously, you can be blunt in a bad way, but I've always been a people pleaser. So being blunt for me is really just me communicating either how I feel or just saying something without remorse. For example, I ran a half marathon last weekend and I'm a single man. And obviously, whenever you run a half marathon, there's probably going to be some attractive females there as well. So I decided to go jog along this nice lady and talk to her for a little bit, and that turned into a date. So if you're blunt and you're bold and you're unapologetically yourself, good things will happen.
Nimrods are winning all over the map. What can the Nimrods out there even say? But this is the movement you got to join. These are the people you got to listen to.
Very inspiring, Mel and Chet. Another big change I made is fully surrendering to Christ, going to church by myself every single week, reading the Bible every single day, sitting with God every single day. I'm all in. And it has become the center of everything I do. And I can say that confidently. I've always been a follower of Christ, and it's just been a gradual ramp up. But like for the first time, I can say I am all in completely. My whole life centers around it. And I think that changes the way you look at everything else in your life. And it helps you take your life back from the globalists that want to sedate us. And the last thing, speaking unashamedly, never really had a problem with speaking unashamedly, but I no longer care about the audience. Sometimes you have to be bold and you got to speak about your values and your faith in a work setting, in a family setting, with your neighbors, at a party, when you're talking to a random girl you just met. You have to speak unashamedly, and you have to be radical in everything you do to start the chain reaction and to actually change the world. We all have our own role, and that's one little way that we can do it. Chips make chunks. Some issues I'm having, I've been sitting with God more, but I don't make enough time to. I think I, again, have a stimulation problem, an attention span problem. It might not come from scrolling, but at all times I have either a podcast or music playing, and I don't really know what to do with myself when I don't have some sort of stimulation. So I've been working on silence, sitting with God, not just talking to God, but letting him talk to me, being available. And I think that the other thing I'm trying to figure out, given my newfound re-energized faith in Christ, I'm trying to figure out what God's plan is for me. He is clearly telling me to be radical. I feel it every day. I felt a void in my life. I asked for it, and he's made it abundantly clear that I need to do something. That there is some way where I can leave a legacy and bring more people to Christ. I just don't know what that is. I have all the energy. I have all the willpower. I just don't have the direction. Now, God has a plan for all of us, and I pray every day that he gives me the wisdom to make sure I go down the correct path.
And whenever it comes to reading the Bible or prayer in public, don't be a Pharisee. The reason you do it is for your own good. However, whenever you're practicing these things in public, whenever they see a young, strong man practicing these things, that makes a very big impression on somebody's day-to-day. The media thinks that a lot of young men are going into these bad addictions. They're not Christians. They're not believers. So when you pull up your Bible in public, when you're on an airplane and the person next to you is watching you read it, not only are you being able to advance your spiritual level and your understanding of the Bible, but that puts an impression on other people to hopefully find the same journey and the same goal as you and to get into their own faith. There's a statistic, I believe there's multiple different sites, but I believe it's whenever the man is the teacher and the giver and the shower of the faith in the family, somewhere between 75% and 90% of those children will become strong in their own faith. Men are supposed to be the strength, the cornerstone of families and societies. So when men are practicing their faith, it puts a very strong impression on others and can advance Christianity much further than otherwise.
Amen. What an action-packed agenda today. We mourn the loss of our sweet, sweet Dick Cheney. We delved into the Likud attempted hostile takeover of the MAGA movement and the Republican Party. We talked about what the losses in these November elections mean for the right wing in the future of America. And we really focused on the attacks against men, Christian men, and what we need to do to move forward. God commands us all to be radical. You may not be a president one day. You may not be the Pope, but you have a role. And you can leave a legacy in your own way, striving to be more Christ-like. The easiest thing you can do, as Mel said, is proclaim your faith unashamedly to all who you come across. It needs to be the center of everything that you do. Jesus commanded it. But don't settle for just bringing your Bible to the office and leaving it on your desk for all to see. Don't settle for questioning the DEI restrictions at your workplace because it conflicts with your faith. Don't settle for a woman who's not a Christian. Don't settle for a non-Christian political leader just because they represent your party. It's time for us to step it up. You may think you're just another cog in the wheel, but you can do anything through Christ. So be radical. Rebellion against tyrants is obedience to God. Obey God. He will protect you. The shield of Christ will protect you from evil. The answer to 666 is 1776. May the power of Christ compel you, demons. Get out of my head! Get out of my head!